Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and trade week is almost done and dusted, and time will tell, but I think the D's have pulled off a nice little heist in securing Ben Brown and trading up picks to secure an earlier spot in the draft order. Returning to the podcast tonight is longtime co-host Grapeviney. Good evening, Grapeviney.
Good evening, Andy, and good evening to all the Demonlanders out there.
And also joining us tonight, long-time caller to the show, Bin Man. Well, not so much a caller anymore. You are a co-host. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Grapeviney. Hello. Good afternoon to the Demonlanders out there listening on this beautiful afternoon.
Oh yeah, it is afternoon. I'm so used to evening. We usually do this at 8:30, and it is 5:20. So yeah, it is an afternoon. And yes, as I said, what well, not a massive day of trading for us, but we did get our man in Ben Brown, and let's start talking about that. We'll talk, even though the Ben Brown thing, the Ben Brown trade was the last domino to fall into place. But we'll talk about that first because it has larger implications for the team and the D's going forward. So we traded. We in came Ben Brown. We also received pick 28 and a future fourth round pick, and that cost us pick 26. So effectively, that pick 28 and 26 sort of just. Sort of nullify each other. Pick 33, which is what we got for Preuss, and a future fourth round pick, which we got from Brisbane from an earlier trade, which we'll talk about later. But I guess what that means is the two future fourth round picks, when we talk about who wins the trade, it all depends on where both teams end up next year. But those future fourth round picks are usually just sort of junk at the end that they throw in. Grapeviney, I'll start with you. Ben Brown, you're happy to have the big bustling Ben Brown in our team.
Big bustling sideshow Bob, I think they call him, isn't it?
His hair does resemble him.
Look, if you've got to be jumping up and down about this, I don't see how anyone can think that this is bad news, just on the player alone, let alone what we paid for him, which is, absolutely fits in the cheap as chips category. Effectively, a pick in the 30s. You could say you could say we've turned Preuss into Brown.
That's it.
So,
I mean, any scenario you look at where you turn Preuss into Brown is a win for us. Definitely.
Look, you can, and people have compared him to Jeremy Cameron. I think they've got very similar numbers in terms of, in terms of their record, and Geelong have parted with a lot more to get Cameron. So, this is just excellent work by the club. Brown, more than 60 goals in a season, 3 years in a row. Would have been, could have been, nearly was Coleman medalist. Didn't have a great year this year, but there's no reason to think that he won't be able to return to his very best in 2021.
I'll go over to you, Bim Man. So we're bringing in Brown. I think I heard King, ex-North Melbourne player and commentator, sort of say that Brown and Wiedemann, that it might be an issue because Brown and Wiedemann are sort of similar type players. They're more lead-up forwards rather than crash and bash. How do you see Ben Brown and the Weed and I guess Jackson as well sort of working in that forward line together?
Oh, look, I think it's a really good setup. I think the sort of lesson from last year actually was that I'm not convinced that Wiedemann is the traditional sort of lead out full forward. A number of times we talk about it on the podcast, but he's maybe he'll get stronger, and of course he probably will as he gets a bit older, but he's not strong enough under the ball in that sort of man-on-man contest in the square, and Brown clearly is. So I see them actually complementing themselves perfectly, and I could see Brown playing that lead-up role. Who gets on his bike, he covers a lot of ground, Brown, and allowing Wiedemann, one, not to take the best defender, arguably, in the opposition, and maybe he's sort of better off getting up near centre-half forward. And as for Jackson, I don't see that being an issue. He's almost not a traditional forward, Jackson. He's, with his athleticism and mobility, he's almost arguably sort of like an athletic half forward in the mould of obviously different height and all of that, but similar to Hannan in that role. I think that he's flexibility means that it's sort of not three big forwards, it's just the two. And assuming, of course, Tom McDonald's not at the club, allowing Jackson to, really be that sort of mobile forward that runs up the ground and does a lot of marking up the ground and has the, can go into the ruck, obviously. And I can see him next year actually going into the midfield at different times, whilst Max is rucking, Jackson, that is.
You did mention T-Mac, but it looks like T-Mac is here to stay. I don't believe there were any serious suitors for him. We heard Collingwood maybe, Essendon maybe. It doesn't look like anything is happening there. Apparently, Josh Marnie was on Trade Radio not long ago mentioning that T-Mac is going to be staying at the club. So I'll throw it out to you. Where does T-Mac's role at the club now? Do we move him to defence? Is he there in case one of Wiedemann and Ben Brown get injured? Is he that third in line in the forward line to get a game? Where to now for T-Mac? I'll start with you, a great Viney.
Well, he's got a very big question mark next to his name, doesn't he?
Well, we've thought he's been carrying an injury, so...
Look, can he be reinvented elsewhere? I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, it's not like he hasn't played back already. We know what that story is, and he did have some success down there, but he went forward for a reason. Look, I know others have talked about him perhaps slimming down and being on a wing. Personally, I can't see that happening. When you're talking about the makeup of the forward line, Fritsch is in there too in terms of being a marking target. So, I do see him as depth at the moment. I just can't see any other position for him, and I don't see that he's going to get ahead of any of the other chances for the forward line there. So, look, he'll get his chance in pre-season to put his name in front of the selectors, but big question mark going forward.
Big man, thoughts on T-Mac going forward?
Yeah, look, for me, it's one of the great mysteries of this year because, I was banging on about it all season, basically. It was clear as day that he was overweight, carrying an injury, whatever you want to call it. So probably a combination of things, who knows what. He was definitely carrying too much weight. There was talk early on Demonland that maybe that was deliberate, and that sort of came up again near the end of the season. Someone mentioned that on Demonland. That doesn't make any sense. What sort of club in this day and age gets your key forwards to get heavier? But then even if that was the case, I can't understand why they didn't play him out of the square last year because his lack of mobility was just disastrously exposed up on the half forward line. And so for me, it all hinges on his fitness and mobility. He's not going back. I mean, it's easy to forget that the only reason he went forward was a Hail Mary because he was pretty much about to get dropped as a backline because he just took on ridiculous kicks and he was the worst turnover merchant pretty much at our club off that half back line. So forget him going back, particularly if he's not mobile. Forget him on the wing if he's not mobile. Forget him anywhere, really, if he's not mobile. And that's obviously why no other clubs are interested in him. It's not that's what one of the funny things about this time of year is, talking about players and thinking, well, professional elite football clubs aren't going to suddenly see him as an option if we don't. So, I could see if he gets his weight down and he sort of gets back to that physique and athleticism and mobility in 2018, I could actually see the three of the Ben Brown, Wiedemann and Tom McDonald potentially playing together. If, as I say, Jackson almost plays a hybrid role, but only if he gets back to that sort of mobility. And obviously no doctor, but I'd fear that. It seems to me, I worry that he's got chronic injuries. That means that he's not going to be able to get back to that. I suspect his weight's to do with not being able to do enough running on the track, because remember last preseason, he was nowhere near the top of the time trial, and ever since he's been at the club, he's been in the top 1 or 2 in the time trial.
I think one of the other issues in terms of trading him to another club was his current contract. He is contracted. It's quite a large contract, and it would mean that either they'd have to that we might be paying some of his salary. So you never have like to send someone elsewhere and still have to pay 100 grand, 150 grand of their salary. And I guess with the whole situation with not knowing list sizes, I think today maybe they got a bit of an indication or an actual indication that list sizes might be 37 to a maximum of 44. But yeah, I think that all that's still a bit up in the air.
It's some fall from grace, though, isn't it? Like, I was trying to think about the last sort of player who was, 2018, he was easily in our top 5 players, wasn't he? Particularly in terms of his influence on our likelihood of winning a given game of footy. 2 years later, we can't even trade the fella.
He was extremely consistent, wasn't he, in 2018?
Yeah,
almost won the Coleman medal that year. Missed even missing a few games. I think if you based on his averages that year, he would have won the Coleman.
And you talk about the accuracy issues that we had, particularly with Fritsch. I mean, T-Mac couldn't miss in 2018. He was an absolute dead-eye dick.
Yeah.
So he really had seemingly had the complete game. So as Big Man says, it's hard to sort of imagine what's happened.
Yeah, and his ace in his pack was his mobility, his ability. You had to play big on him. You couldn't play a medium on him because he was strong. But his ability to get up and down the ground, and Hogan, when both him and Hogan were in the team, both at their sort of best, running their opposition bigs up and down the ground, basically running them into the ground. That was his, running back with a flight of it, getting him up, being a marking option down the line. He was a dominant forward. I remember there was a discussion back then when he first went up there. Pro D was talking about he's not a natural forward, and sort of countered by the fact he almost won the Coleman. But I think in history would prove Pro D pretty right on that one. He didn't look a natural forward when he could, the really good forwards, when they lose a bit of mobility, can rely on their I guess their forward smarts, like the way Fritsch marks the ball. He uses his body so well. T-Mac doesn't seem to have that ability to sort of position his body underneath the ball. And, it's a real mystery.
So, look, I think we can move on from T-Mac. But you know what? There are still, I just read, I'm just keeping an eye on Twitter just in case any other trades regarding us come through. There is still 2 hours to go. So T-Mac might not, this conversation might be moot, but I don't think so. I think we were also shopping around Tom's brother, Oscar, one of your favourite players, Bin Man. Doesn't look like there are any suitors unless something happens at the 11th hour.
Why not try and throw the parents in as steak knives and give them away as a whole family package?
Well, wasn't Dunkley trying to be used, our Dunkley, used to go to the Bombers in order to lure over Dunkley from the Bulldogs? So this seems to be a theme.
I'm taking the Donald Trump approach to any concerns about OMAC leaving. I'm not conceding. I'm refusing to even engage in that discussion. And when he stays at the club, I look forward to posting my big ups for OMAC when he gets to stay around for next year. And I'm not conceding at all.
Is he still contracted?
Maybe not.
I'm
Just
not sure.
just on Donald Trump, and he's copped a lot of grief, but I'd like to see Goodwin adopt some Trump tactics. And, if we hit the front early in the second quarter, why not hold a press conference and claim that that we've got the win and we get the 4 points, and that's it. No more goals, or any goals thereafter shouldn't count. So
No, I think
I
the
don't
go
mind that
is
idea.
no. I think wait to the end. Wait till we're beaten by say 34 points or so,
And then
and
ask
then
for a
say no.
recount.
I refuse to accept that result. We won that game. That would be more in line with Donny, I think.
Fake goals in the last quarter. Some dead people were kicking
Dead
goals.
people kicking goals.
Just before we move off Brown, the thing that totally 100% concur with what Grapevine has said. I mean, why wouldn't you want him at the footy club? And he's everything in some respects that T-Mac's not in terms of natural forward. He's such a natural forward. He was picked up by North from memory from Werribee on the back of how obvious it was he was a gun forward. Now, obviously, the knock might have been last year and he had some knee problems. Who knows what went on in terms of his relationship with Shaw and all of that situation, which has sounded just terrible for obviously for Shaw. But you make an interesting point, Grapevine, about the comparison to Cameron in terms of the stats. The other comparison to Cameron is he had a woeful year this season. Cameron, he could barely. He was terrible. So of those two, Cameron's a terrific footballer, but he's being paid probably 2 or 3 times more than what we're going to be paying Brown. And I'm looking forward to Brown. Last year I hated the fact that he might have got a few frees against us, but I tell you what, next year I'll be, hopefully he'll get every one of them and they'll all be deserved.
Well, he doesn't realise he's coming to a team that doesn't get those type of free kicks. So let's hope he does. Just on Oscar McDonald, he, according to Lucifer Hero's post in the contracts thread on Tuesday, Oscar, James Jordan, and Bedford do not have contracts yet. So
Interesting.
their contracts expire this year. So that's interesting. There were a few other guys that we were sort of shopping around. I believe Neil Bullen's name was thrown out. Jeddah's name was thrown out. Vandenberg's thrown out. Obviously, no one biting there, but they are also they're contracted until the end of next year. So interesting. And T-Mac, as we're talking, still has 2 years to run on his contract.
It's be a surprise if Bedford didn't get another season. I mean, he started didn't he play the first game of this season?
Yeah, played the first game, kicked a goal
near the end,
I think.
I saw him at North Melbourne at that practice game at North Melbourne, which seems like a long time ago now, pre-COVID.
Back when we could breathe into people's faces.
Yeah, I could yell. And he played all right that day. He was pretty neat the way he moved the ball. And, that would be unusual. And the other one, James Jordan, am I right in thinking he's not played a senior game? Or?
No, he hasn't yet. And 2020 didn't do him any favours in there not being a second tier competition. Yeah. That's all coming back next year. But what's not helping their situation is the fact that the list sizes are going to come down, so they might just be unlucky. That's the way it is, and I'm not sure what the situation with guys like Lockhart are. Obviously, I think clubs are going to be able to have 3 or 4 rookies. So we've got Lockhart, Mitch Brown. I mean, where does getting Ben Brown leave Mitch Brown, who's a rookie? Do we keep him on as a rookie? I like Mitch Brown. I thought he was well ahead of Tommy Mack. Not 2018 Tommy Mack, but 2020 Tommy Mack for sure.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I thought he was terrific in the last 2 or 3 games.
He got Brownlow votes in the last game.
And if those two stay, in Brown and T Mac, where does that leave Harry Petty? I mean, how much key forward depth do we need?
Well,
We've
you
gone
would
from
think
none
you would think they're going to move Petty back to the back line. Considering if Omac's not there, he's going to have to sort of go back and be that the backup for May, Lever if they get injured. Smith.
And just to be clear, Andy, there's no guarantee OMAC won't be there. I fully expect to see him there round 1 next season and look forward to it. So,
look, some of those guys might get a contract. We gave guys like Hibberd, Jones, Hunt were all given an extension of 1 extra year on their contracts.
Hunt got 2, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, sorry, I think Hunt did. You're right, Hunt until the end of 2022. But Hibberd we gave a year to, Jones we gave a year to. Let's quickly talk about that because these things sort of happened in our sort of our break. Jones, what do you think? What do you think of that? Giving him, you would think they're doing that to try and attempt to get him to 300, but it still requires him to play 14 games. Is he capable of playing 14 games, or what's happening? What's the go there? Grapevine, I'll start with you.
I think it's going to be a struggle, but I support the club doing it. And I think that even if you took the milestone out of the picture, I don't want them to act for sentimental reasons. But I think that he's worth signing up. He was worth giving an extra year to anyway. It's not going to come at great expense, and I think he is very valuable depth. I think he's going to struggle to play 14 games unless there are injuries. But in terms of the seniority and the leadership that he provides, when you weigh it all up together, absolutely worth having 1 more year of Jonesy about the place. I noticed that people have sort of been saying, I'll go into a coaching role. Has he actually said that he wants to coach? It seems to be the default position for every great or good player who's coming towards the end of their career. I get them as a coach, but I don't know that really all of them or many of them even want to coach.
Well, not everyone's suited to it. But it's not something I think you can sort of.
But
you can
has Jones specifically? I don't recall him sort of saying that he wants to become a coach post footy. So anyway, to answer your question, I'm very glad that the club gave him the additional year.
Big man.
Yeah, default would be a good name for a really critical Demonland podcast, wouldn't it? Sort of. I think one of the things I find I guess frustrating is probably the wrong word, but at this time of year is exactly as I say, Grapevine, I'll back the club in. I don't, if they think he's good to go on for another season, I mean, they're in the position to make these calls. Of course, I can have a view on whether I think, we bring an Isaac Smith in or Brown, but I'll back the club in. I think what's the downside would be my question. My query is his pace, and it's not so much his pace. It's just that if you have Tomlinson in the side, you've got him in the side, Brayshaw's slow, Tom McDonald if he's in the side. Suddenly you've got 4 or 5 players who aren't very quick. You can carry 1 or 2, but you can't really carry 4 or 5, 6. You start to get exposed by teams like the Saints and the Dogs. And why not? The other thing I think that's interesting about his role at the club is that talk about a schism between Viney and Oliver, and I see him as a bit of a sort of bridge between those groups potentially. He's a bit older. I don't think he's going to get sucked into that stuff. Whereas Maxie sort of started his career with Viney, and he's been around a long time. I think it's sort of, we've talked about it for a long time about how we lost James McDonald, but those sorts of players who are part of the club for a long period of time bring a lot more than what you see on game day, I think, to a footy club.
Well, you brought up pace, which is something that I would like to talk about. Actually, we were going to. Well, it seemed like we had put our hat firmly in the ring for. And you mentioned Isaac Smith. Bin, maybe start with you. Were you keen on Isaac Smith, bringing him to the club, considering his age? I think he's 31, about to turn 32. It looked like our deal to get him was a 3-year deal, which would have brought him up to sort of 35 years old, or 34, 35 at the end of his career at the D's, if he lasted that long. What were your thoughts there? And just in general, thoughts on trying to bring some pace into the club? Because it's something we're certainly lacking. Someone on that other wing. I think everyone we've put on that other wing hasn't worked out. We bought in Langdon for one side, and that's worked beautifully. Thoughts on Isaac Smith?
I was super keen for him to come. I mean, it's so frustrating to see sort of the free agency work with Geelong, who have just been beaten in the grand final, be able to pick up a player like Isaac Smith. No knock on him. I'm wanting to go to Geelong, but that's not the sort of model of equalisation I would have thought. But yeah, I was hugely keen for him to come. I mean, he's relatively quick. I wouldn't say he's super quick, but he carries the ball forward. He is a natural winger, so he would complement Langdon. But he's also a really excellent kick, and as I've mentioned many a time last year or this season, that's our biggest weakness is our kicking, in my view. And he would give us pace, outside run, good meters gained, and he's an excellent kick who gets really good depth into that last kick into the forward line. And he's got the skill that it drives me nuts how few Demon players have it, of weighting the ball properly to the forward's advantage. And so, yeah, I was really keen for him to come to the club. And I think it's a big problem for us. Last year, we had at one point Brayshaw and Jones pretty much rotating off that wing, and they were just so painfully slow. And unfortunately, Tomlinson is about the same pace as Jones. So, we brought him in for the wing. It doesn't appear that he's a natural fit for that. So I was really disappointed we couldn't get him. But I wonder whether Jordan, for instance, maybe that's why he's on the outer potentially, is because by all accounts he's not super quick.
There was also, talk of Phillips from Collingwood and Polek from North. Doesn't seem like, well, there were sort of whispers about them, but there didn't seem to be anything solid. So I doubt anything's going to happen in the last few minutes of trade week. So yeah, we don't have that.
Part of the problem with Polek, I think, was he's on pretty good coin, and I think better coin than perhaps he's worth. So I think there might have been a bit of reluctance to take on such a hefty pay packet on that front. So yeah, it looks like. It looks like we're sort of looking internal for that, and not everyone's really happy with with the options. We've already seen some of them tried and haven't worked. So yeah.
Oscar Baker's
Baker.
I mean, if
Baker showed some glimpses,
and he had a sort of interrupted pre-season this year, hasn't really had a good run at it. I think he had osteopubblitis maybe or something at the beginning of this season. If he gets a good pre-season under his belt, I'm not 100% convinced, to be honest, but he was really good in that I think, was it the Saints game or one of them, one of those late season games. So he might be an option. He's a bit like Hannan. I mean, is that he goes in and out of the game and doesn't get enough possessions. I wonder if something left field, like playing, Jackson could even play on the wing almost. I know it sounds a bit sort of out there, but he's so athletic that I could see him basically playing on a wing.
Short of getting another Langdon, and boy, imagine having two of him.
Yeah,
Smith really would have been perfect to fill that position for probably the next 2 years. The third might have turned into, turned to mush a little bit. But if we'd been able to get 2 solid years from a 3-year deal, that would have been fine by me.
And as you say, grapevine about Brown, like, I mean, where's the how anyone could say that Smith wouldn't have helped us. I just don't get that. I mean, it's a no-brainer,
Yep.
I would have thought. So,
Yep.
just on, you mentioned Petty. I reckon it's a really interesting one because for me, when I think of the footy team, he's really the only standout player who sort of didn't get into the side this year for whatever. It was obviously injury. But when I think about who's underneath the best 14, 15 players, I worry we drop off the shelf a bit. When I think about who might come up and end up being a really sort of top line, maybe an A-grade player pushing for All-Australian who's not in the team, he's the only one really that for me jumps to my mind. So it'll be really important, one, hopefully that he does reach that potential, but two, where they end up playing him. And as you say, we've got enough forward, so maybe it is going back, but and playing that almost fullback role that Oscar McDonald was playing and Tomlinson playing. And Tomlinson's not a defender, I don't think so.
All right, let's just quickly run through a couple of the pick swaps because I think this sort of highlights Josh Marnie where I think he shines the most in trade week, and that's with these pick swaps with other clubs to sort of some bringing picks that we can use to on trade for other players, and in turn what we've done a bit later with Sydney, where we've brought in, we've given them 2 picks and traded up to pick 25, which sort of replaced the pick 26, which we gave to Brown. So it started with Brisbane. We got from Brisbane pick 43, which we then later used in the pick swap with Sydney, which we'll talk about soon. And we also got Brisbane's future 4th round pick, which we end up using in the Ben Brown swap. So that sort of cost us our pick 53 this year, which you would imagine we probably wouldn't be using, and our future 3rd round pick next year. So I think that was sort of a good pick swap. You sort of look at these and you say, well, what's this all about? But they've obviously got a plan in mind. We then did a pick swap with Adelaide. We swapped pick 33 and pick 50. We got pick 33, which we ended up using. Which we ended up using for the Brown pick, and pick 50 we got in. And we've sent away a couple of our next year picks, a 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick in 2021. So these picks, we looked at them early in the week and said, what's this about? But we've actually used it. It's just come in handy to help us get Brown. Let's talk about the Hannan swap. What did we get for him? We got a 3rd round pick, 2021 3rd round pick for Hannan. Sad to see Hannan go, but he obviously wanted to explore his options. Look, Hannan, I think he goes missing in games. I like it when some of the things that he does do, can take a nice mark, can kick a goal, helped us win a game in an elimination final with a beautiful kick, but really just I don't think does enough. A little bit injury prone, particularly in the pre-season. For my liking, I don't see it as a huge loss for us. Big man?
Yeah, I mean, I always sort of had a soft spot for Hannan, but as you say, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. He sort of just doesn't get enough possessions, doesn't kick enough goals, and he's a smart fella, and it seems like he'd be an excellent clubman, and good to have around the club. And just never really he played some really important games, and he always had that knack of kicking some important goals. But yeah, he drifted in and out too much, and like many of our sort of half forwards who just don't impact the game regularly enough.
Yeah, cameos rather than consistency.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
And look, the cameos were really good. He had a good leap. He knew how to run and make space, and not a bad kick for goal either. So, it's sad to see him go. But I think that the 3rd round pick is probably about right. I know people said they gave him up too cheaply, but you've got to put the shoe on the other foot in these situations and say, well, what would you be prepared to give up if we were getting Hannan in right now? And Would you be willing to part with more than a third rounder? Well, no, probably not.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the part of the frustration of the sort of conversation often around this time of year. I mean, he's probably what you'd argue in our team, he'd be in the 15 to 22 mark, and we're a team that didn't make the finals this season. So, we're not going to get a huge amount for a player who's not in our best, say, 15 or even top 10.
I'm just seeing here, we picked him up with pick 46, which is probably about the same, isn't it? And then I think back to last year, and Dean Kent went to St Kilda for 63, I think. So,
yeah. And I was thinking, Graveney, that he's the sort of similar player, isn't he? I mean, it was you could see him going to St Kilda and doing well, but I'm not shocked that he's sort of also in and out of games.
Doing fringe stuff. Yep. Again, a cameo player, I guess.
Yeah.
The next one, Preuss. I think this was actually fantastic. Look, if you would have said you could trade out Preuss for pick 31, you'd be pretty wrapped. And if you then said that turned into Ben Brown, you'd be even more wrapped. I think that's well done. I think we won out of that one. But I guess GWS did have an urgent need to bring in a ruckman. He wasn't getting the advantage, he wasn't getting the opportunity, at the Ds, particularly with Jackson coming in behind Max. Look, it's fair enough that we allowed him to sort of explore his options, and I think we did really, really well in terms of the pick we got for it. And then when you put it all together in trade week together, I think we did fantastic out of that, and I don't think anyone can be unhappy with that. Graveney.
No, I mean, how many games did Preuss play? Couldn't be more than a handful, could it?
Played that first game where he kicked 2 or 3 goals against Sydney. Performed sort of admirably this year.
Yeah.
In a couple of games when Max was out, which I was rapt about because he did play really well. I'm trying
to think whether over the history of trading and drafting, whether anyone's has seen their value improved so much on the back of so few games.
I think it's fantastic what's happened. I think it's right place, right time with that one.
But look, as you say, he played well when he got the chance, and so that's all you can really ask for as a player. When he had the opportunity, he took it, and good luck to him. He's gonna ruck for the next few years. And it's a win-win all round.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I can't recall. I might have said it on the last podcast, or I find it curious the sort of near universal criticism and critique of his decision to come to the club, given that he'd have to get past Maxi, and then we bring Jackson to the club, and then so he's nominally behind Jackson in that lineup for being ruck, because he was clear about why he was doing it, and he made it clear that his decision was not about getting necessarily game time. It was about learning how to ruck, and he thought the best way to do that was to come to Melbourne and to ruck under Stafford and learn under Stafford and what he saw as rightly the best ruckman in the AFL. And it made sense to me at the time. There was any number of commentators just saying how weird a decision was, and it makes sense now. He's got the payoff. He's done the 2 years of work. Burgess has got him super fit. Now he's gone to a finals contending side who will be much better next season. They had a terrible run of things this season. Who will play finals. He'll be their number one ruck on good coin, and as you say, it's a total win-win. I think that it was smart footy by him and smart by us to have that insurance, and well played all round, I reckon.
Are you worried now we don't have, he was sort of that backup ruckman, and I don't like to sort of say this, but if Max goes down, Jackson goes down.
We'll have Tom McDonald.
That's right.
But look, you still, even if, disaster happens, with all these tall forwards now, we could work it out. And particularly if Mitch Brown stays on the list, then we got more than enough cover that Ben Brown will be able to still stay in the forward line we won't have to empty out the forward line to fill the ruck spot.
No, and I mean, there's sort of discussion as well around, I think Max is the best ruckman I've seen in footy probably since Teasdale. But it's the sort of a pendulum around the role of the ruckman. If you look at most of the clubs, don't really have that bigger ruckman. You think of the way the Dogs use English; he's not even that tall English, and Brody, if the Pies is not that tall, is he? So you can, as you say, Grapevine, you can always bring in a sort of a medium player. And I always thought when he was given the opportunity, Wiedemann was pretty good in the ruck. So, you could always run a player like him. And he's a player I'd like to see get a bit of time in the ruck, because I don't know what happened last season in terms of his appetite for the contest, but it seemed to sort of drift away. And, we've got plenty of other options, I think.
My issue with using forwards as that spare ruck is whenever we've done that, it's left whoever's left at home in forward is double, triple teamed, and that's when we always give up those young time goals, and the ball just goes straight out of our forward line, straight down the other end of the ground. So I'd like to. That's why I'd like Jackson to sort of play forward and into the middle when Max comes off the ground, and leave Ben Brown and Wiedemann up forward. And you don't have to have Jackson in the forward line the whole time. He is mobile. He can go up further up the ground onto a wing or into the middle as well. But I don't like leaving one forward, one out. It doesn't work well for us based on past experience. Well, that's the end of our trade, unless something happens in the last couple of hours. But a couple of things I want to talk about before we go. There was a massive thread going on for a while. I'm not sure how involved you were. I sort of ducked in every now and again, but it involved Clayton Oliver. And that early on, before the trade period even started, there was those rumours that he wasn't happy at the club. He wasn't happy with where he finished in the best and fairest. I still believe that all rumours blown completely out of proportion, but there was nothing going. It wasn't going away. You'd hear some of the media mention it. Not sure whether I'm mentioning it based on some of the Melbourne supporters online, or not even the Melbourne supporters, the Carlton supporters who thought they were going to get him for a steal, get him for nothing. Are you worried about Clary? He has a year left on his contract. If we don't perform next year, there's a very good chance that he might seek, some success elsewhere. Are you worried about that, Grapevine?
Well, no more so than I am about Christian Petrarca or anyone else on the list potentially going elsewhere. I think the Clayton Oliver stuff, I must say I didn't read the whole thread. I read bits and pieces along the way, and I think it was mostly fake news. And I saw even journalists in the media sort of saying, this Clary stuff where's it come from?
Well, they were all saying, we've spoken to Melbourne, we've spoken to his management, but that's not always the end of the story with those things. But
and look, if he's frustrated at not playing finals, then good. The players should be frustrated at not playing finals.
I'm frustrated, but I can't leave.
And I don't think having frustrations at those things necessarily translates into discontent, or that you're about to walk out the door. So, it's the same with this sort of riff with Viney. I don't know that there's really too much to that either. Jack became a father this year, and that changes things. There's
hub life wouldn't have been great for everyone.
No, and look, those first few months of parenting are very trying. So it would have been really tough for him. But go back, it's 2 years now. In 2018, that midfield group was tight as anything, and they loved each other. Anyone who follows them on social media, Oliver, Petrarca, Brayshaw and Viney and Max, and even Harms to an extent, they were very tight. And so I don't think there's a rift. I don't think Oliver's on the cusp of walking out. And if we have a really bad year next year, then sure, players might look elsewhere. But as I say, I don't think that he's at any greater risk of going than others.
Well, the reason I say that he is a greater risk is because his
Because he's out of
contract
yeah.
his contract is out of contract at the end of next year. Petrarca still has another year on his contract, Petrarca's sort of taken his game to the next level. I'd like to see Oliver do that as well. We know how good he is, but we want to see him
He's pretty at the level already.
Yeah, but just a bit more consistency.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, look, I think people, Demonlanders, are very, very harsh in their criticism of him. And I understand he can still elevate his game. There's no doubt about it. He can go up another level or two, and getting consistency is important. And doing more of what we saw a bit of this year, which is bursting out of the packs and getting clear before disposing of it. But he's been playing at a very high level for, 3 years or 4 years now. So, I think some of the scrutiny of him is very unfair.
B-Man, thoughts on Oliver in that situation?
Working backwards is that totally agree. I think that I don't think consistency is an issue. He's been super consistent.
No,
I think the thing that I'd like to see actually is elevate to that next level.
Yeah,
and
that's what I meant.
In order to do that, I think I want to see him kicking some goals and kicking clutch goals and pushing forward and because he's a good set shot for goal. He's smart around goals. He's and as Grapevine said, it was great to see him getting more meters from the contest and moving forward out of the contest. In fact, a curious thing just quickly about the Bluey was that he polled better in the first half of the season. And I felt that he played much better in the second half of the season. So I'm not quite, who knows what that's about. But in terms of a couple of things is, I think if he's frustrated not making finals, as Grapevine said, good. So are we all. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he wanted to leave if we don't make finals next year. I mean, and good, fair play to him. I'll be disappointed if we don't make top 4 next season. Where we should be in our development with coming into his 6th season next season for Goodwin. That's where we should be. That's where we should be aiming for. So he'll have every right to be disappointed if we're not there. The rift, who knows? But I think that, it frustrates me. A group of 40-odd blokes, testosterone, young blokes, there's always going to be conflict. And I think that's the challenge for a coach, is to make sure that all works. And again, I go back to maybe that's the importance of having an old head like Jones around the club to say, look, fellas, let's think of the long goal here and, get our heads down. But you're always going to get conflict. The final thing I'd say about that whole situation is it's just classic 2020, social media palaver. All of that's likely to be driven by managers and people who want to know stuff, and it's just the whole industry of gossip, that sort of an ecosystem of gossip, really. And if I was a player manager and I wanted to drive up my player's contract for next season, I'd be sort of putting it out there on a footy forum and a bit here and a bit there, and word up Sam McClure, and next thing you know, there's an issue. So I don't think this is any different to what's happened with footy for 150 years, really. We just know about it a bit more.
There's a huge vacuum to fill in the footy media because the landscape is so big and wide these days. And, and I know that this happened before Trade Week, but because there's just so many column inches or screen inches and airtime hours to fill that it's a wonder that they don't actually go through every single player in the competition in these sort of discussions and deliberations and speculations, because there's
a manager trying to steal a bit of that airtime.
Yeah. So
the other ones I was very happy that we've signed up Rivers and Cozzy They've extended their contracts to the end of 2023. I'd love to see them get Luke Jackson sort of over the line sooner rather than later, because I don't want he's out of contract at the end of next year, and you just know both Fremantle and West Coast are going to be coming hard for that signature. So he's one we really need to lock in, and I think we also need to be successful for that to occur too, because otherwise we could be losing him.
It's funny, isn't it? Because people said the same thing about Hogan, that we're going to need success to keep him, and yet he stuck with us throughout the journey to success. But when we finally got there, he basically left when, at the time, it seemed like we're on the cusp of potentially winning a flag. So it doesn't always work out the way you think it would.
There were a lot of other issues sort of involved
No,
there.
of course.
But I get your point in terms of we always thought we were going to lose him, and we didn't lose him because of a lack of success. There were the other issues, I think, going in Jesse's life is what got him. But I'm happy. Look, I hope he can turn things around now at his third club, GWS. So best of luck to Jesse. On that. Last two things are two past players.
Sorry, just before you go on, Hogan turned out to be very good business too, didn't it? When you think about what we got and what we gave away, and where he's ended up, and look, he still might play well for GWS, and I'm sure most Melbourne fans would wish him all the best for that. So,
well, when you talk about the Preuss trade and how we sort of turned him into what we did and effectively got Ben Brown out of it, it's the converse has happened at Freo for what they gave up to get Hogan to what they ended up getting for him. That was the exact opposite situation. But
and we ended up. It didn't look so great maybe in the first few weeks first couple of months of 2019, but we ended up, of course, getting May, who's everyone loves May now. So, but I guess with that grapevine, you never quite know what, it's easy to think backwards, but who knows, if he'd stayed in Melbourne, he might have sort of addressed some of his issues and thrived. And, it appeared not to be a great move after all for him going back to Perth and his mates and all of that stuff. So, I think there's a real danger in rewriting history. I'm not saying you were then, but, I think that, it's hard. It's like what's going to Port Adelaide is that just because he didn't thrive there and he's retired doesn't mean that he wouldn't have thrived if he'd stayed at Melbourne, for instance, But, yeah, you're right. I mean, we've done pretty well out of it, and, geez, it would be hard now to think of Melbourne Footy Club without Stephen May at the club.
A couple of ex-players from the 90s / early 2000s are back at the club. You boys happy with Adem finally coming to the club as an assistant coach and maybe a coach in waiting one day? Great Viney, you and I, we have some history with the Ooze. In particular, we claim that we
created
the Ooze in the red seats. I'm sure there's probably other people that claim that too, but I'm positive that it was us. I believe. Don't you have a press clipping somewhere that
I have? I'm looking for it. I haven't come across it yet. But just to explain to the Demonland listeners out there, at some point in the early 1990s, and I can't remember why, but I wrote to the Sunday Age when they had on the back page of the lift out was the PST section, PSST.
Right. Yes.
And I said that you and I had come up with the Uze cry because we'd always been jealous of the wolf that accompanied Val Perovic, and they duly printed it, and we did get the credit for it. But as I said to you the other week, I honestly cannot remember whether we actually did come up with it. But I can't for the life of me imagine why I would have claimed it.
No, we were there. We used to sit in the red seats, those couple of seats before the fence.
Yep.
Remember, we used to always sit there, and that was sort of on the opposite end in the red seats from where the cheer squad was. And there wasn't a lot of people sit unless it was a packed house. there weren't a lot of people sitting where we sat, and we started it. We would go ooze, and then slowly it just sort of, got more people around us started saying it, and more people, and then more. I'm telling you, it was us.
Well,
Unless
look,
memory-
the challenge is out there. If you think that you created ooze rather than Andy and I, then by all means come forward. We'd love to meet you.
There's no way that
I
we can be.
think it was me from the top of the Consford stand.
No, definitely started in the red seats.
Right.
Definitely started in the red seats. So Uze Grapevine, are you happy with that? He's got good pedigree.
Yeah.
If you have a look at the last, I saw it the other day on Twitter, the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years of coaches, I can't remember what the exact number, but it could be 8, have all come from, back to when Clarkson won his premierships with Hawthorn. I think almost every year, maybe bar one, or maybe every year, was a disciple of Clarkson. Doesn't mean you're going to be a successful coach, but it seems to be a good pedigree.
Yeah, well, I think I might have read on the forum that the club was chasing Adem last year, even.
Yep,
but Clarkson was obviously very keen to hold on. But we've got him this year. I'm delighted, and I know a lot of people have also been saying, well, such a beautiful kick of the ball might be able to teach the players a thing or two on that front too. Well, that'd be good too. I think it's great. It's great. Sorry,
I don't think you can teach. I don't think you can teach that. You can maybe teach someone for a set shot to improve their technique, but I don't think you can improve in game.
You can have
a little bit of technique.
You can improve technique, you can, but
instincts.
Problem is teaching a 22-year-old, good technique who's come to AFL with rubbish technique. That's the issue.
Well, that's
Look, these things need to be done on their merit, but you can't deny that there's a bit of romance attached to it because the Ooze was such a popular player and such a good player over a long period of time.
And by all accounts, a ripping bloke as well. So, who knows? I mean, the only measure I've got is that he seeming, how would you know whether he's good at his job other than the fact that Hawthorn wanted him to stay and didn't release him from memory? They wouldn't release him from that contract.
But he also, when last year when this happened, not only, I don't think it was that they released, but he signed a further few years to his contract, which he's since broken.
Yeah. So if you back that up with the fact that we've kept Burgess, which was a really strange situation, because I think we talked about, or you might have mentioned it on a podcast, that it wasn't clear whether Burgess signed more than a 1-year contract.
The original thing was definitely 1 year.
Yep.
Well, everything I read in the beginning was 1 year, or it really wasn't clear. But then,
there were even rumours. There were rumours very early on in his tenure that someone was already trying to poach him before it had put his bags overseas, down, basically.
An overseas soccer club was trying to poach him.
Yeah, Arsenal.
No, he's come from Arsenal.
No, sorry, or Liverpool maybe. I think there was rumours that, as it turned out with COVID, it was probably a genius move for him to be. But then there was pretty strong talk that on Demonland that Port Adelaide were into him, the Crows were into him. He's from South Australia, isn't he? Is he?
Yeah, yes. I think it was the Crows because he was originally at Port at some stage. So I think Adelaide were going hard for him. I believe, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think his family is in Adelaide. So it's a good chance that he might leave at the end of next year, maybe the year after. I don't know. It depends how many years he has on his contract. But
and you think about our injuries this year, it can't just be dumb luck that we had such a good run.
Particularly with soft tissue injuries, like how few soft tissue injuries.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. Absolutely great results in comparison to everyone else. So,
touching wood.
Yes.
Touching wood. I recall Chuckles. What was our last fitness guy called?
Dave Misson.
Dave Chuckles Misson saying when he first started at Melbourne, it took takes 2, 3, 4 seasons to build up a fitness level for an AFL player, like multiple pre-seasons, which is why it's so problematic for a player to have interrupted pre-seasons at all. So, someone like Oscar Baker needs to string a couple together. So I think that probably sort of points to the importance of Burgess at least having another season to build on the pre-season, the base that he put down last year. And I wonder whether, with all that's happened this year, and in some ways we can bin this whole year and the footy season, and that the players hopefully will really launch into the fitness that the pre-season work that he'll no doubt put into them, and maybe the real payoff is not his first season, it's his second season, and if he does leave, at least we've got those 2 seasons under at the club.
And just lastly, boys, because I know you've all got to fly, Brad Green joins the club on the board as sort of as a director of football, or sort of the liaison with the football department, someone on the board. What do you think of that decision? I don't know what credentials he's got in terms of that, but I like the idea of having someone on the board that has some sort of football. I'm not sure, as I said, I don't know what his credentials about being on a board of directors is, but I do like that there is someone with footy knowledge that can liaise with the footy club, but I'm not sure how that's all going to work. Big man?
Again, I don't know his sort of credentials. I do recall some discussion last year about concerns of not having enough footballers, people with footy experience forward. And is Leoncelli, he's involved, isn't he?
I think he used to. I was going to say the same thing. I think he used to be. I don't think he is anymore.
But I personally think it's really important to have those ex-players who have got a passion for the club, because that's how you knit clubs together. And I think it's sort of, you talk a lot about, footy's business and all of that, but it's not quite business, is it? It's more than that. All the romance of Uze coming back, you can see the points to that. And someone like Brad Green, particularly with what he went through and the club getting around him, and players like Neitz, who are, they're super important. And I can't recall whether, again, it might have been you, Andy, an interview you might have done, or I'm not sure, but there was discussion from a player, maybe it was on ABC, about a player who had played at multiple clubs, and the question was how they see him. One of them was Melbourne. I just can't think of who it was. And he's saying that Melbourne have a fantastic, it was from that era, and Melbourne have a fantastic past players group.
It might have been with that Rod Grinter. He's involved in that. And they do.
They do a super job.
Yeah, they get all the guys back. I'd actually like to maybe try and get Leon Shelley onto the podcast. He follows us on Instagram, so it'd be very easy to sort of chat with him or get him to come on, because I'd like to see about that involvement, with what his thoughts about board sort of stuff, and how that sort of all works.
And that's all part of building a culture, isn't it? I mean, culture is sort of, it's a bit of a thrown around as a motherhood statement, but it is so critical, and it's sort of got so many different elements. It's not one thing, and you got to have a lot of things right. But, I think the thing for my whole life of barracking for Melbourne is the consistent thing has been boards and admin all over the shop. And it seems pretty stable for the last period of time. And I just don't think there's any footy clubs ever who's successful without a stable administration and board and, all of that stuff, all your ducks lined up in that space. So, I think it's super important.
All right. And with that, I think we'll end it there. Thank you, Great Viney, for joining us. Thank you, Big Man. I think we'll be back just after the draft.
When is the draft?
The draft is the 7th of December. There's a good chance we're going to be getting Jason Taylor on again. So, Great Viney, I'll speak to you about that, and hopefully we can have a chat, because it's always good sort of speaking to him, particularly when we don't have someone a pick in the real pointy end of the draft, to learn about these players that we get with like pick 25 and those picks that we've got remaining after that. So it'd be good to have a chat about that. All right, guys, we'll catch you later on. All right, thank you.